Junior Motorsports has a major announcement scheduled for tomorrow at Sonoma Raceway, and 2011 Informer Motorsports have been denied an opportunity to have a request, and they could lose their charters by Dover. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and our motorsports stories discussed today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. We're first going to talk about Red Bull, as it was confirmed that Red Bull will sponsor Shane Van Gisbergen in the NASCAR Cup Series race this weekend at Sonoma Raceway. This is, I believe, the third of 5 scheduled races they are going to sponsor SVG this weekend, and the first time they're sponsoring Shane Van Gisbergen at a road course this season. He'll be looking to take the Red Bull car to victory lane. The last time Red Bull won as a sponsor in the NASCAR Cup Series was only back in 2011, when, of course, Casey Kane won in the number 4 Red Bull machine almost 15 years ago. It would be an incredible deal if Red Bull was to go out and pick up a win this weekend, and I think they've got a really good chance and a strong opportunity to do that. The car looks also really awesome, by the way, so glad to see the Red Bull car is back, and I think it's good they will be sponsoring Shane Van Gisbergen this weekend in the NASCAR Cup Series race at Sonoma Raceway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Sonoma purses for this weekend. So every time we have a NASCAR Cup, Xfinity, and Truck Series race, Bob Pockrass puts out the purse money for the event. And for the Cup race, it's $11,055,250, and for the Xfinity race, it's $1,651,939. For the Cup Series, obviously, they get the majority of the purse money every single time with the new charter payouts that comes every single week. For Xfinity, I usually would say that number is actually pretty good. I think for this weekend in particular, I think they probably should have increased the payout a little bit. I would have liked to see the number kind of go up to like 1.8 or even 2 million for the weekend because of how much travel these teams have to do. I would definitely love to see a number be up just a little bit more. It's not a bad number by any stretch of the imagination, but I think the number could have been better. But at least for the Cup Series, the numbers are solid, and at least the purse money's up for the Cup Series for this weekend. That's really good to see, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Sonoma Cup race once again, as the Grand Marshal has been officially named. The person who will be given the command is celebrity chef Tyler Florence. Tyler Florence is, of course, a celebrity chef, not on the same levels like a Gordon Ramsay or Jamie Oliver, for example, but Tyler Florence is someone who is definitely very, very popular, I think especially on social media as well. So I think it's pretty cool he'll get the chance and opportunity to give the command for the NASCAR Cup Series race. I think he'll probably do a really, really good job. It's exciting to see someone come in from a different background, get the chance and opportunity to give the command for the event. I think that's exciting, and I think that's something that's really cool that will come out from the NASCAR Cup Series race at Sonoma. Pretty cool stuff, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Dollar Tree. As it was announced yesterday that Dollar Tree has officially signed a contract extension to continue being a sponsor with Legacy Motor Club through the 2028 season. They will continue working as sponsor for the number 42 car throughout the season, and also continue sponsor the number 43 car for Eric Jones through 2028 as well. Now, the drivers are still unknown at this point past 2026. I believe John Hunter and Eric Jones are going to return to those cars for the 2026 season, but past 2026, it's unknown. Now, I know there's been some issues when it comes to money for Dollar Tree in recent years, but it's good to see at least Dollar Tree is going to be sticking around at least for the next couple years as a sponsor, and that's a big deal to have a company like that sticking around, because Dollar Tree joined, I believe, in 2023 as a sponsor, so to see them continue working very closely with this team, that is a really, really big and exciting deal for that brand as well. So I think it's good to see Dollar Tree has exciting extension. They're going to be around for a couple more years on the 42, 43. That is going to be an iconic look for those teams going forward into the future. Pretty good to see a long-time sponsor coming in and sticking around and being back in to work with the Legacy Motor Club group for the 2025 and through 2028 as well. Really exciting stuff, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Austin Hill. As it was officially announced that Austin Hill will be making his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut this weekend, as he'll drive the number 35 for Joey Gase Motorsports this weekend in the Xfinity Series race at Sonoma Raceway. Now, just one thing to note, this is not the Austin Hill who drives the number 21 car in the Xfinity Series and also drives the number 33 car for RCR in the Cup Series at times. This is a different Austin Hill. I believe this Austin Hill also is not from Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. And this guy currently competes in the SCCA Trans Am Series, and I think he competes in some GTO classes as well outside of the IMSA World. So this is a different Austin Hill. So for people being confused, this is not the same Austin Hill that many of you are probably thinking at this point. I really hope this guy can do a really good job. It'd be funny if these two ran into each other and they did like Xfinity Twitter or their group did something like this going forward. But it's pretty cool to see someone like him get the chance and opportunity to race in Xfinity. It's good to see another new driver coming in. I think that's exciting, and I think that's really great to see. Good to see that will be happening and them getting the chance to be in the series. Hopefully this Austin Hill guy can do a really good job and do really solid with the Joey Gase Motorsports team this weekend at Sonoma Raceway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the grandfather clock. As it was officially reported by multiple accounts out there that the company that makes the grandfather clocks for Martinsville Speedway that have been making them since 1964, that unfortunately will be closing at the end of this year and they will not be around past 2025. Now, it is unknown at this point who will be coming in and producing the clocks going forward. I wonder if NASCAR could in some way, shape, or form get a bunch of clocks on back order, perhaps like 100, 150, or 200 clocks at this point in back order to keep in their stock for many, many years, or they've already been working on that backlog at this point. So they probably knew something like this was inevitably coming. But I think Dale Jr. said something that I completely agree with. He said, whoever is the new person who makes the clocks, do not screw this up and don't mess up on this. And I entirely agree. The grandfather clock for Martinsville, that is one of the most iconic trophies that you can get. If you win that is so important in your racing career, and you've won something that is absolutely legendary to the sport. So I think that if something like that was to go away, it would be definitely very, very disappointing to see. So I'm glad to see that they're looking to maybe get someone in there for, like, can keep it in there for many, many years and keep it in for a very long time. So I think that's what a lot of fans want at this point, right? They want a company that can come in there and do a really good job when it comes to making something like that. So we'll see. We'll keep an update on this as time goes on and see who comes in. But it's definitely shocking and surprising to see news like this, right? Because we've had a company like this around for a long time in many, many years. And to see that they're going away with something that's worked for a long time is disappointing. Just really disappointing stuff in general, and not good to see that they'll be going away. Hopefully they do get someone in there that does a good job with it and doesn't screw that up like Dale Jr. said, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Apple. As it was reported by Adam Stern, I believe it was on Wednesday or late Tuesday, that Apple is currently in talks to acquire the U.S. broadcast rights for Formula One for 2026. And according to a report, it sounds like they are willing to spend around $150 to $200 billion for the F1 broadcast rights. Now, ESPN is reportedly also still in talks and conversations to try to go and pick up the U.S. Formula One rights, but it sounds like that what they are wanting is a lot different than they currently have at the moment, where all the races are broadcast, there's no commercials, and there's no races behind a paywall, like behind like Disney Plus or something like that, or whatever company that Disney runs at this point. They're talking about putting it behind a paywall in some way, shape, or form, and only having a few races on national television. Regardless, when you think about Apple TV, the numbers for Apple TV are not too impressive, and I do think that if the US F1 broadcast rights do go there, I actually do think that the US rights, they will lose a lot of people because a lot of people do not have Apple TV currently at the moment. I guess you probably watch some like Cardinal games or like baseball games on there, and there's like some MLS games that are on there for sure, but the numbers for a lot of those events are not very, very high. And I think especially if they were to say like on national television, for example, because they're asking for insane rights to stay in the U.S., for Sky Sports especially, and I think that if they were to go to Apple TV, for example, too, they would probably lose the opportunity to have the Sky Sports people coming over and commentating. I think that's the charm of the F1 broadcast too, is Sky Sports are the ones who are broadcasting the F1 races. So I think that's something to kind of look at as well, is that if they do stay in the United States and if they do go to Apple, do they get their own crew or they stay with Sky Sports? Because again, I think they're going to want to do their own thing, which I don't really want to see at this point. So we'll keep an eye up, update on this story as time progresses and goes on, but it seems like there's a lot of uncertainty around Apple and whether they're going to be going over there into the future when it comes to broadcast rights for Formula One. We'll keep an update to it, but I do think that there's a good chance you'll see races for F1 and Apple TV, which I think will kill the growth of Formula One in the United States, and I think it will kill the opportunity for the sport to grow, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the IndyCar Mid-Ohio TV ratings from this past weekend. As was reported by Adam Stern, that Fox earned 775,000 viewers for the IndyCar race at Mid-Ohio. That is down from 1.25 million on NBC in 2024. Now keep this in mind, last year this race on NBC, and this was a lead into the Chicago Street Course event for 2024, which of course we talked about the number in a video that you saw earlier today, where around 4 million people, I think 3.9 to 4 million people tuned into that event. You had a lot of people that tuned in to the IndyCar race at Mid-Ohio, and it was one of the most watched events outside of the Indy 500 in the 2024 calendar season. 775,000 viewers for an IndyCar event, considering you had over 7 million people, I believe, tuned into the Indy 500 this year. That number is really, really disappointing to say the least. But I think that there's a big problem that you got to look at. Number one, the IndyCar race was going on at the same time as the NASCAR event. I think that Fox should have been a lot smarter with this and not be going against NASCAR. Because I think that number, if this would have been like a lead-in, for example, or after the NASCAR race, because the Cup Series race got done early enough and it doesn't get dark till a certain period of time, they could have worked with NASCAR, for example. I get they're on different networks, right? But they could have worked with NASCAR and had the F1, not the F1, the IndyCar race on after that. And I still think the numbers would have actually been a little higher. But I also don't think IndyCar is as appealing, unfortunately, on that front, though we'll talk about one of the things that is appealing about IndyCar that is a benefit for. But it's a little disappointing for the numbers. It's shocking to see the numbers not be as high for IndyCar this year, because I know that Fox has done a lot of promotion to try to make IndyCar look as big as it is, but the numbers are a little disappointing, and they're not the highest for IndyCar. Wish they were a little bit, but they're not as high as they could be, and I think that's really disappointing for IndyCar currently at the moment, especially past the next couple of years with the contract they have with Fox and IndyCar right now. I think there's some uncertainty about that as well, and really hope those numbers can be bigger, but 775,000 is not that great, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about IndyCar once again. Now, I remember a rumor that circulated around the future of a potential change to the point season format for IndyCar going forward into the future. Well, Doug Boles has confirmed in the last couple days in an article that was released by Racer.com that Doug Boles confirmed that they will stay with the full season format going forward into the foreseeable future, but they could be returning with some sort of all-star race format in the future at one event. Now, of course, we all know that the Thermal Club will not be returning for 2026. They talk about doing some different format for that at like a different track. As I mentioned, Thermal Club is not coming back next year. I think Tim Mayer, who runs the Thermal Club, confirmed that in recent weeks that they are not going to be officially coming back. I think that the full season format, though, for IndyCar is one of the big charms that I see with motorsports across the board. NASCAR, again, of course, is really the only series that has some sort of playoff format that at least is in the U.S. Of course, the Supercar series in Australia, they do have some sort of like countdown championship, I'm pretty sure. I think the NHRA also does have some sort of countdown to the championship, if I'm not mistaken, which is some sort of playoff format, but it's really a good playoff format compared to what NASCAR has currently at the moment. But I've always said this, I prefer the full season format when it comes to motorsports in general, and I get that this year you've had a blowaway with Alex Palou, who's over 100 points ahead of the rest of the competition and could very likely lock up the championship in the next couple of races. If he wins, let's say, one of the oval races, like at Iowa, for example, this weekend, which he absolutely could, I think then he'll lock up the championship very quickly at that point, because he doesn't have to get too many more points and he'll lock the championship up in IndyCar at this point. But again, I prefer a full season format. I think it's the best way to determine a champion. And I think that's the best way we can crown who is the best every single year, because everyone can say, yeah, you may not think the championship this year is the most exciting. It might be a blowaway, but at least you have a well-deserved and well-earned champion in the sport. So I think that's a big positive on that front when it comes to IndyCar. I get the racing has not been as strong this year for IndyCar either, but I think a full season format personally is the best way to determine a champion in the NASCAR sport, or not IndyCar, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Xfinity Chicago TV ratings. And honestly, the numbers for this weekend on the CW were pretty good. As reported by Jeff Gluck, that 1.137 million viewers tuned in on the CW in 2025 for the Chicago Street Course event. That number is up 51% from 2024. One of the biggest increases we have seen for the Xfinity series so far this year when it comes to TV ratings. That number was only about half of what the NASCAR Cup race got, which got 2.1 million viewers compared to last year, which got 3.9 million viewers. I think last year's race got like 800,000, 850,000 or something like that, but that is a massive jump from the prior year to have over 1.1 million, which is one of the most watched Xfinity races so far this year. And there's a big reason for that. You had a lot of guys from the Cup Series come down and race that event. Of course, you had Shane Van Gisbergen come out and race the event. And he had a head-to-head battle with the Red Bull branding as well. And there was a lot of promotion around that as well from a lot of people to tune in and watch that event. But also the Xfinity Series race, let's just be real and honest, was a better race in general than the NASCAR Cup Series race was. And when you look at the racing product, especially for road course racing, the Xfinity Series does put on a better show. And the racing product there is generally really fun to watch for Xfinity. I think that's why a lot of people are tuning into these NASCAR Xfinity Series races at road courses because they're really fun to watch. But I think it's really good the ratings are up for this weekend in Xfinity. I'm not sure how the ratings for Sonoma are going to be this weekend for Xfinity and Cup, for example, because generally Sonoma is not one of the most watched races every single year. But I think it's nonetheless really good stuff and pretty cool to see that the Xfinity Series numbers are pretty good for this weekend. Having over 1 million people tune in is a really exciting and really big deal. Glad to see that the numbers are really good for this weekend in the Xfinity Series race at Chicago. Really exciting and really great stuff, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Christian Horner. As it was officially shockingly announced and confirmed on Wednesday morning and Wednesday afternoon in the UK that Christian Horner has officially been sacked and fired by Red Bull effective immediately. Laura McKees, who has been the managing director and who's been the CEO and, of course, the race principal and team principal for the AlphaTauri organization, the Racing Bulls team, he'll be taking over as the team principal going forward. And Alan Permain, who has been the president over there, I believe, at that team, will be taking over as the new team principal going forward into the future as well. This is the most shocking Formula One story we have probably seen since it was announced that Lewis Hamilton would be going to Ferrari for the 2025 season, which, let's be real and honest, has not been the best so far with the Ferrari, outside, of course, picking up a sprint win so far in China this year, though there have been some good runs for Lewis Hamilton in that Ferrari throughout the year. But Christian Horner leaving is definitely shocking, but it's also not the most entirely surprising as well. There's been a lot of tension over at Red Bull. We all know the Red Bulls have been struggling this year in Formula One, and Max Verstappen has been carrying that car. And there has been a lot of chatter and speculation that Max Verstappen could leave Red Bull to potentially go to Mercedes in 2026. George Russell still not received the contract extension for the 2026 year, and many are led to believe that one of the big reasons why we haven't seen the contract extension happen is because Max Verstappen is probably going to get convinced to go over to Mercedes for 2026. Now, Max Verstappen technically does have a contract of Red Bull for 2028, but he does have an exit clause if he continues to struggle with the team, which, of course, the Red Bulls have been really struggling so far this season. As for Christian leaving, there are a lot of people, of course, have left the organization recently. Jonathan Wheatley went over to the new Audi team that's going to be happening next year. And then, of course, we all know that Adrian Newey went over to Aston Martin. And I think many people think down the road you're going to see Max Verstappen end up in an Aston Martin if he stays in Formula One long term. Plus, I think the Mercedes, though, right now, that Mercedes plane is definitely a lot quicker than the Red Bulls. And, of course, you have the uncertainty of what's going to happen with Red Bull with them switching over to Ford. In the end, you got to ask yourself, who is Red Bull going to get to replace Max if they leave? That's the big question you have to ask yourself. Are they going to replace someone from there like Liam Lawson to come in? And are they going to do good? I don't know at this point. But Christian Horner leaving, there's been a lot of tension that's happened. There were some allegations that came out last year. They kind of were a big story nationally in the motorsports world. But it's kind of shocking to see Christian Horner leave. I got to be honest. I was very surprised to see this news. And I think it was shocking for a lot of people to kind of see that just out of the blue and out of nowhere that Christian Horner is leaving. So I hope Laura McKees can do a good job and make the program better. But and maybe this will convince Max to stick around. Who knows at this point. But right now, there's definitely some uncertainty and some tension happening at Red Bull, and I think they've gotten frustrated with some of the frustrations over at Red Bull currently at this moment. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ronnie Childers. Now, Ronnie Childers was responding to a fan saying, I hope you are back next year, and I can't wait for you to be back next year. Well, Ronnie Childers basically indicated in the same tweet that it sounds like he'll be back in the NASCAR Cup Series in some way, shape, or form in 2026. Now, Ronnie Childers did not confirm exactly what team he is going to be associated with on the crew chiefing side of things, but of course, Ronnie Childers was the crew chief for Justin Haley early in the season, but was unfortunately let go and made the decision to leave the team early in the season, and they were not really getting things done over there with Justin Haley, so they moved on early in the year and early in the season. So this definitely was a major shockwave when it was announced, and many people have been wondering if Ronnie Childers was going to be back on the crew chiefing box for 2025. Of course, it did not end up happening for this year, but it looks like he'll be back in 2026. Now, who is he going to be the crew chief for? I think a lot of people are going to say, could he be the crew chief for Chase Elliott with him replacing Alan Gustafson? Many people are talking about him. Alan Gustafson struggles with Chase Elliott. I personally don't think Alan Gustafson is the problem. And I think that 9 car actually in recent weeks has had a lot of speed. Say what you want to say about the finishes. They've been definitely improving a lot more over the 9 team. And Chase has closed in on the regular season championship. And Chase has had the most consistency of anybody in the field this year. So I don't want to see that pair broke up currently at the moment. Now down the road, I think things are going to change. Maybe we'll see that guy from the Adam Wall come in and maybe be Chase's crew chief in the future. But right now, I don't think anything is going to change on that front. I think I have a little bit of theory around this, though. My theory is that he is going to join up with the Trackhouse Racing Group, and I think he'll be the crew chief for Connor Zilisch in the NASCAR Cup Series next year. I think that Connor Zilisch and Ronnie Childers working together would be a really big deal. Number one, Ronnie Childers is very closely tied with the Trackhouse Racing brand, I believe, considering he works with Keelan, who Trackhouse is really looking closely at. Plus, Justin Marks does have a really good working relationship with Kevin Harvick in the car store currently at the moment right now. And I do believe that that is where Ronnie Childers is going to go next year, is work with Connor Zilisch in the Cup Series. I think that's who we'll be working with next year, or working maybe with Shane Van Gisbergen. And maybe you see Steven Duran go and work with Connor Zilisch next year, and maybe put Ronnie with SVG. I think that'd be a really good working relationship. Or maybe we see him work with Ross Chastain. Considering with the Busch relationship, that would be something I'd be interested to see at that point. But I think it's really cool that it sounds like he'll be back in the NASCAR Cup Series next year as a crew chief. I think that's a really, really big deal. I think it'll really be exciting to see what Ronnie Childers can do in 2026 as a crew chief. But again, it looks like he'll be back in the NASCAR Cup Series next year as a crew chief, which is really exciting and really great to see. Hope he can do a really good job as a crew chief, regardless of where he goes for the 2026 NASCAR Cup season on who he ends up working with. Some say replace Blake Harris. I don't think that's going to happen at this point, but I think he will be working with Connor Zilisch next year. That's my prediction currently at the moment, with Connor Zilisch expected to be in the NASCAR Cup Series next season. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. As it was officially announced and confirmed yesterday that Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing will be splitting from the BMW Group and form in the World Endurance Championship in IMSA at the end of 2025. Rahal's had a relationship with BMW for many years, going all the way back into IMSA back in the late 1990s, all the way into the 2000s and early 2010s as well. This is definitely a really shocking departure for Rahal, considering their longtime partnership. And this year, of course, they jumped up to the main GTP series over the last years. And I think this year, their department has been really strong and really, really good this year. So it's definitely shocking and surprising. So could Rahal stick around and go to another manufacturer in IMSA? My prediction right now is that they are probably going to go over and work maybe with Acura, considering their ties with Honda currently at the moment right now. So I think they'll probably go work with the Acura group going into next year if they do stay in IMSA. But there still is some unknowns about what's going to happen if they do in fact stay in IMSA, or if they're going to go to a different motorsport. They mentioned something very interesting in this article, and they mentioned NASCAR. According to what was mentioned by Marshall Pruitt, there has been talk and speculation that they could potentially have a NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series program in 2026. Now, Bobby Rahal would not be the first time that Bobby Rahal has had some association with the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. From 1997 to 2000, Bobby Rahal had a team called Glow Rahal Racing. This team had drivers like Ron Barfield Jr., I believe also Boris Said maybe drove for the team at one point, if I'm not mistaken, and many drivers during that late era drove the number 55 truck for a couple of years. And there were a couple other big names that also drove for the team that would have success in NASCAR as well over the years. So this would not be the first time that Rahal Letterman Lanigan has been associated with NASCAR, though it would be the first time a Letterman name has been associated with NASCAR. But it would be really exciting to see RL Racing have an association with NASCAR. And maybe this could be an opportunity for Graham Rahal to branch away from racing in IndyCar down the road and try something different. Because Graham Rahal is a very talented race car driver, but let's be real and honest, Graham Rahal in recent years, he's been carrying that Rahal equipment at times, but also has kind of struggled with that equipment at points as well, because their qualifying speed and their qualifying prowess has just not been that good at this moment. So I think changing things up is not a bad thing at this point. Maybe making some changes to the program is absolutely a good thing. But I think it'd be really exciting to see maybe part of that Dodge program, which we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit. I think that would be a really exciting thing to kind of look at for them at this point. We'll keep an update on the story as time progresses and goes on, but again, it looks like there's going to be some changes happening. It's a shame they're leaving IMSA, it sounds like, at least with the BMW program currently at the moment right now, and maybe they come over to NASCAR. I think that's a cool thing. I know Chip Ganassi Racing's been brought up as a possibility to go to BMW next year. They might be going over there with them leaving Cadillac at the end of this year. That would make the most sense to switch over to the BMW group at this point. So we'll see what happens on that front, considering some of the drivers are part of the BMW group. Maybe Kevin Madison ends up back at Chip Ganassi Racing. We'll keep an update on that, but big story nonetheless that Rahal's leaving BMW, and they may have a NASCAR program down the road into the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about road courses. Now, there has been a lot of talk on social media and chatter over the course of the last couple days about a number of road courses on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. Now, currently at the moment, there are 6 road courses on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule every single year. And there's a lot of conversation around the amount of road courses that are on the schedule every single year. Now, it all really started from a Pete Pistone tweet that went out talking about fans complaining about the amount of road courses that are on the schedule currently at the moment right now, considering fans really were clamoring for back in 2019 and 2020 when the Gen 6 car raced really well on those tracks, and the intermediate racing was not very good at the time. Well, this conversation really reached a boiling point when Brad Keselowski put out a tweet basically saying, we jump from 2 road course races every single year up to 6 or 7 within a very short span. That's not entirely true, by the way, Brad. There actually were 3 road course races on the schedule. We jumped from 3 up to 6 or 7. And Brad basically said that we have too many road course races on the schedule currently at the moment. We have way too many. Now, keep this in mind with Brad Keselowski. Brad Keselowski is probably just saying this for one reason. Yes, he's had 2 cars that have been really competitive with Ryan Preece and Chris Buescher, who have been major contenders at road courses. But let's be real, Brad Keselowski is not that good at road course racing in general. His numbers have not been very good. He's also never won a road course race in his NASCAR Cup Series career. Just bringing the facts right there. Also keep this in mind, did he say the same thing about super speedway racing? Because if we're talking about having too many road course races on the schedule, we need to talk about the same thing about super speedways. Considering the fact we have the same amount of super speedway races every single year as we do road course races. Now, my opinion is I actually think 6 is a perfect number for the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. That is a hot take, but I think 6 is a perfect number. Because if you're going to have 6 super speedway races, you need to balance that with 6 road course races. Now, if he was saying it's about super speedway racing, I actually would agree. I think there's too many super speedway races on the schedule if we're going to talk about that. I actually think 6 may be okay at this point, but if we have too many road courses on the schedule, then we have too many super speedways on the schedule as well. I think 6 is a perfect number. Now, if you go past 6, I do agree with that. I know there's been talk about maybe 7. You're kind of going a little bit too much at that point, but I think 6 is a perfect number. It's not even 20% of the schedule. If you count even the exhibition races, there are 32 oval races on the schedule. Again, 6 of those are on super speedways. So that's something we need to look at as well. And also, and people talk about, oh, guys dominate at road courses as well. Well, then you just got to get better at them. I will say, though, the competition at road courses has definitely improved. I think the road course racing generally has been good. And I will say, you compare that to some of even the super speedway races like Daytona, Talladega, I think Chicago and COTA were better races than Daytona and Talladega races this year. Just saying, even better than the 500, which was all right this year, but it was better than Talladega. Both of the road course races were. I'll just say that. And I think that some of the super speed races outside of Atlanta have been not that great, in my opinion. So I really would rather watch a road course race right now than watch a super speed race or even a short track race, for example, at the moment. And again, I talk about IMSA and all that stuff, and I get that Brad brings up the IMSA argument. I completely understand that, but I don't think 6 road course races is overkill. Now, again, if you go over 6, I agree. If they want to downsize to 5, I'd be fine with that as well. I think 4 to 6 is the perfect number. I think the jump up they made, that was too much. I think they could have done it a little gradually, but I don't think 6 is too much. I think 6 is a perfect number when it comes to road courses, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ram once again. Now, there, of course, is a lot of talk about the future of Ram and what they're going to be doing for the 2026 NASCAR Craftsman Truck season, as they are expected to join the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2026, as it has been confirmed. While according to Adam Stern, Ram has considered doing a reality show of drivers trying out for a ride with its new program for 2026. And it has been confirmed that Dana White is expected to get involved with this program if this reality show happens for the 2026 year. And according to articles, while that was surfaced by Adam Stern, they still plan to have a program for the Cup Series around 2027 or at the latest 2028. When I hear a lot of stuff about Ram, it is certainly interesting. Now, this reality show will be something very similar, as Adam Stern mentioned, to the Driver X program that Roush did from 2004 to 2006, or the program they did for many, many years. Roush had a program that actually started in 1999 that went up until the 2006 year. Notable names that won this, of course, Carl Edwards won the Gong Show in 2002. 2004, I believe it was won by Todd Cleaver, if I'm not mistaken. I think David Reagan almost won one of them. I think he actually won in 2006, if I'm not mistaken. But some notable names that were part of that. Kurt Busch was part of that. Scott Riggs was part of that, by the way. Justin Allgaier, I found out, was part of that in 2006. And Timothy Peters, I saw his name mentioned, I think, in like 2002 or 2000 or something like that. He was part of that Gong Show at that point. Other people like Nathan Hazelou, and I believe another guy that was part of that ended up driving for Roush that season, he was a guy who also won that as well. But it's certainly interesting if they're looking at doing some sort of reality thing. Now, they are still talking to current teams at the moment. There have been some teams that we've mentioned. Nice Motorsports was mentioned at one point, but they've denied that they are going to be going over next year, so I don't expect Nice Motorsports to switch over and stick with Chevrolet for next year. Some have mentioned that CR7 Motorsports more than likely is going to be one of the teams that may end up switching over to the Dodge program next year, and I think that is certainly a major possibility at this point that they could potentially switch over. I'd keep an update and eye on them for sure to be one of the teams that may end up switching over next year. I also think that there is a chance you're going to see Rhett Jones Racing join. Of course, they had a former relationship. Cletus has denied these rumors, but there's been a lot of talk that Cletus may get involved in some way, shape, or form with Dodge. I saw someone mention Tony Breidinger, which, again, I'll be real and honest, no disrespect to Tony Breidinger, but if your top drivers are Cletus McFarland and Tony Breidinger for that, I think that's not the best look for your program at this moment right now. But I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen with the said Gong Show they're going to do and what drivers and teams they're going to get at this point, because it seems like they're throwing things at the wall and trying new things. And I'll give them credit. The marketing side of things and Tim Kaniska's marketing side of things, they've been doing a really good job on that front, trying to promote and market the sport and think it's bigger than it already is at the moment right now. But I think there's some things they absolutely can kind of look at to try to make the sport at least a little better at this point. So we'll see what happens in regards to the Ram program going into next year, but I got to say there's certainly some interesting things around that right now, and I think that there will be some big things that come about that in the not so distant future when it comes to the said Ram program. So we'll keep an update on this as time goes on. We'll be paying attention to the story for sure, but to me, I think it's certainly interesting, and I think that there will be some good things coming out of it for sure. I'm interested to see which drivers they do get for the Ram program, what teams they get for the Ram program at this point. GMS Racing, again, is heavily rumored to be going over to this program next year for 26, and they keep teasing some really big things. They had a crate we talked about not too long ago with that rumor, so we'll see what happens going forward, and we'll see what the Ram program stuff is in the not so distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Junior Motorsports. Now, it was put up a couple days ago by Joseph Strigley, actually yesterday as a matter of fact, that it looks like Junior Motorsports has an announcement scheduled for tomorrow at noon Eastern Standard Time and 9 local time, which is 11 Central Standard Time. Now, they did not say exactly who is part of this official announcement, but Junior Motorsports actually put out a little bit of a teaser in regards to what this announcement can be. There's a lot of things and a lot of theories in regards to it. Some have brought up a potential sponsor announcement for Junior Motorsports, which could certainly be a possibility. It could be potentially something to do with Jay McMurray's 2010 Brickyard 400 win. Some have suggested for Carson Quaffle to run it again, but they've already run that car, so I don't think that is what it is at this point. But there are a couple other potential possibilities that it could be. Number one, it could be a potential announcement that they are going to run another NASCAR Cup Series race at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Of course, Junior Motorsports did run their car at the Daytona 500 earlier this year, and there was a lot of talk and there was a lot of conversation that Junior Motorsports was going to run another NASCAR Cup Series race at some point this year. Of course, many think the Brickyard Runner being one of the biggest events of the year, it would make a ton of sense for Junior Motorsports to have a NASCAR Cup Series program run once again. There's talk they could run more races also in 2026, but I think that would certainly be interesting. And if they were to get a NASCAR Cup Series car to run that event, let's say, what driver would it be? I'd have to think it's Carson Quaffle, right? Because Carson Quaffle was the driver that was tagged in this post. I think he could absolutely be the driver for that car. Carson is a very talented race car driver, and from my understanding, there are some NASCAR Cup Series teams that are looking at Carson Quaffle for next year, which I find to be absolutely wild. He could be a potential candidate for the Spire team at this point. A lot of people could be, like Daniel Suarez, for example. So I absolutely think Carson being part of that would certainly be interesting. But I do have a little bit of another theory that it could potentially be, and it could maybe be that Daniel Suarez is getting announced to Junior Motorsports in 2026. There has been a lot of talk and a lot of chatter in the industry that Daniel Suarez could potentially go down to the NASCAR Xfinity Series next year, because we know Daniel Suarez will not be returning to Trackhouse Racing in 2026. And I know there's been some conversation that Daniel Suarez could also maybe stay in the NASCAR Cup Series next year. But let's be real and honest, there really isn't a top-level opportunity out there available for Daniel Suarez in the Cup Series right now. The Hendrick drivers are all set for next year. 2311, we'll talk about the uncertainty of that team, but all those drivers are going to get rides over Daniel Suarez if they have to go somewhere else. Again, of course, Trackhouse, he's not going back there next year, but people talk about JGR. JGR is pretty much set for 2026 at this point, and they've got everything pretty much good to go for that next year at the moment. Other teams like Penske, they're set for next year, and other teams are still working on their contract details, but a lot of teams are set for next year. I think him going to Junior Motorsports would absolutely make the most sense at the moment. The Junior Motorsports team, number one, they have been the fastest organization in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and Daniel Suarez did pick up a win for the team at Mexico a couple weeks back in that number 9 car, which was unsponsored because he did unfortunately get involved in a crash and an incident, but was able to pick up a well-earned and well-deserved victory. I think this is the most likely logical landing spot for Daniel Suarez right now at the moment, is him going to Junior Motorsports next season. I just don't see him going to Kaulig, the 10 card. Yes, they still have not announced a contract extension for Ty Dillon, but it is expected right now that Ty Dillon is going to sign a contract extension with the team and the program. So I think that's going to happen for next season. And generally, though, for Junior Motorsports, I do expect that is where Suarez ends up. I just think that that's where Daniel Suarez will end up next season. I think that's the most logical landing spot at this point. And I think that is where I think that's where he's going to end up next season. I just don't see there another team being an option for next year. We'll have to kind of wait and see what the official announcement is going to be on that front. But again, I do expect right now that Daniel Suarez ends up at JRM for 2026. We'll see what happens on that front. We'll see, maybe get some cup starts as well if he does go there. But I think right now Daniel Suarez ends up at the Junior Motorsports team for the 2026 NASCAR Cup season. We'll see what happens on that front, and we'll see if he does go there. But right now, I think Suarez ends up at JRM in the 2026 NASCAR Xfinity Series season with that team and program. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about 2311 racing in Front Row Motorsports. As it was reported and confirmed by Jeff Gluck and many reporters in the industry that 2311 Racing and Front Row's request for the entire 4th Circuit Court of Appeals to hear the whole entire preliminary injunction case has been officially denied. And as noted, there is a very good chance and possibility that 2311 and Front Row, by the time we get to Dover next weekend, there's a very good chance they will not have charters by the weekend of Dover Motor Speedway. This could have a major effect on all drivers of 2311 and Front Row going into next year, including Tyler Reddick, who does have a clause in his contract for the 2026 year where he is required to have a charter. I believe the same thing goes for Bubba Wallace as well. This goes same for Noah Gragson, Riley Hurts, Zane Smith, and all the drivers in those programs like Todd Gillen as well. This could have effect on their futures. What this means is that very likely starting at Dover Motor Speedway, this means that all of these drivers will not have a charter going event, and they will have to qualify for every single event on speed. Now, the good news is, according to what's been reported, it's not expected more than likely that we talk about JR maybe having a potential announcement for the Brickyard, perhaps. There's a very good chance and possibility that there will probably not be more than 40 cars showing up at most races. So if you're a 2011 Front Row fan, you should be really happy about that. Let's go back to a little bit of backstory. So back a couple months ago, back in December, a judge, which was Kenneth Bell at the time, granted a preliminary injunction to 2011 and Front Row to compete as charter teams for the 2025 season while the lawsuit was going on. NASCAR, of course, went and appealed it, which was expected. They were going to appeal it. They had their case heard, I believe, around May 9th or May 10th of 2025, which is about 2 months ago, and they heard the case, and NASCAR really kind of got a little bit let off when they were having the hearing, while Jeffrey Kaiser was basically reamed by the 3 judges part of the case. And then the original ruling was that they were granted, basically removed the preliminary injunction where they could have charters throughout the year. The judge basically said, you can have your cake, you can't have your cake and eat it too, basically saying you can't have the charters and compete as charter teams. Well, you basically get to go and sue NASCAR, which I guess at the time made a lot of sense, except the fact that they needed those charters because some of the drivers in their contracts have a clause where they are required to have charters to compete as charter organizations and teams. And then, of course, NASCAR, when they basically denied it, the teams, of course, appealed a couple weeks back, and they had that until now, which again means they will likely be unchartered starting at Dover Motor Speedway. There's also been some rumors and speculation, something that's been brought up by a lot of people, is could there be a potential possibility that NASCAR could ask those teams to go ahead and give the money back they've received as charter teams throughout the year they may so far throughout 2025. Braycar suggested this on his channel, give credit to Braycar for this. They probably should have put the money in an escrow account where things could have been set where if the trial goes a certain way and basically they do win those charters back, which could certainly be a possibility. If they do win the lawsuit, there's a very likely chance and possibility that 2011 and Front Row could receive their charter money back and receive those charters back. I would have to think there's something in the case currently at the moment that NASCAR probably will be told to not sell those charters to other teams and organizations. If NASCAR wants to go full nuclear on that, they could sell those charters to other teams, but I would have to think NASCAR is probably going to be like, nah, we're not going to do that because we could get in a lot of trouble, and that could those teams at 2011 and Front Row could suffer irreparable harm. And let's say they were to sell those charters like Legacy or RFK or something like that, or Rick Ware, the new Rick Ware team or something like that. Those teams basically would have to give those charters back to 2011 Front Row if they were to lose the case. But one thing that does need to be cleared up on this front, this does not have a full bearing on the whole entire lawsuit. This is a separate situation. So there's still a very good chance and possibility that 2011 Front Row, if they can present the case all together and basically have things go their way, this could basically give them a chance to win the lawsuit altogether. But this does have an effect, at least on on-track performance. This is really the first decision in quite some time with this lawsuit altogether that's had some official decision on bearing on the official performance of the team and organization, because they're going to be losing out upon millions of dollars, which could put financial strain on those teams and organizations. And it's not to mention at 23rd Front Row, they have spent tens of millions of dollars on this lawsuit, what a lot of people have been saying at this point. Again, there's been a lot of the tedious stuff. We're currently in discovery phase currently at the moment. There is some people saying maybe down the road that 23rd and Front Row could enter maybe a settlement with NASCAR. Some think that's the way they should go. The judge has suggested multiple times that they should enter a settlement. The teams have been open to a settlement from what we have heard, but NASCAR seems like they're full steam ahead, and they don't really want to work in relationship with 23rd and Front Row currently at the moment. Now, if they are forced, if they lose the lawsuit, that being NASCAR, they will be forced to have to work with the teams. They're not going to have any choice on that matter, and they probably will be required to get those charters back. But if they don't get those charters back for 2026, this again could have a major effect on drivers like Tyler Reddick and Bubba Wallace and where those guys go for 2026. I think the silly season on that front has just gotten absolutely wild, and it's opened up for next season, which is certainly very interesting currently at the moment. And those drivers could have to find new rides for the 2026 season. Some have suggested maybe Tyler Reddick going to Spire Motorsports next year, which I find to be very, very interesting, taking over the 7 car, which I'll be real and honest, I don't think that team's better than 2311 currently at the moment. But I also think there's a realistic chance that they're at least going to stay put for now at those organizations until things change. But I'll have to kind of keep an update on this for sure on that front with the drivers. But again, Also, one thing that also needs to be noted as well, this does not affect their playoff eligibility. That's one thing I wanted to clear up as well that I did not mention in the video on, I believe it was Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. This will not affect their playoff eligibility. If they do attempt to qualify for every single race and they don't skip out on a race, which there was talk they could skip out on races if they were uncharted teams, but they probably won't skip out on races going forward because, one, there's only like 17 races left in the season, and they're not going to they only have like 5 or 6 races left in the playoffs. Now, granted, both drivers from 2011 could still miss the playoffs this year. There are still, I believe, 5 or 6 spots, I think 5 spots left available. Tyler Reddick is still looking for his first win of the year, and Bubba Wallace is currently on the bubble of making the playoffs currently at the moment. Now, the other question is, if they do make the playoffs, is there going to be a provision where they have to start up in the front, basically go to the back like the playoff drivers, or are they going to be required, since they're going to be open teams, for example, if NASCAR takes their charters, which is expected they are going to take their charters at Dover, they probably very, very likely will have to start up front in qualifying, which will affect basically their track position and will hurt them in a really big way in qualifying, because if you go out early in qualifying, for example, you're going to struggle there. But if we get more than 40 cars, I think that's going to be interesting on that front. Again, just a reminder though, this doesn't have a full effect on the whole entire case, and there still is a lot to come out from the case going forward in the future when it comes to this lawsuit. We'll be keeping an update on as time goes on. There'll be more information coming out about it really, really soon. Jeff Kessler did release a statement saying they're disappointed with the decision made by the 4th Circuit of Appeals, but he also did confirm it does not have a full effect on the case, which is absolutely true at this particular moment and point. So, that is going to today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What thoughts about 2011 firm potentially losing their charters? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what do you think the announcement is going to be for Junior Motorsports tomorrow? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. In a couple hours from now, we're going to see reactions in NASCAR Xfinity Series qualifying from Sonoma Raceway. Tomorrow will be reactions in NASCAR Cup Series qualifying for Sonoma, and we also are going to have the review for the Xfinity race, and then of course on Sunday we'll have the Cup review and the starting lineup video as well, and then on Monday we should have a NASCAR news video dropping on the channel as well. We got content coming out on people like Haley Deegan, Shaman Ginsburg, and Cards, Kerbush, Cobblish, Ballhouse, Ross Chastain, Cleveland Vaughn, Dodge Fram, Frankie Muniz, Carson Quaffle, Sam Mayer, Sheldon Creed, Brian Priest, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, you name it, all the good stuff. We'll be talking about that on the channel in the coming days and weeks. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.